workshop. I proved you through my Zoom account. So I teach at the University of Pittsburgh in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures. My background is in Russian literature and language. I also received master's degrees in instructional technology from Duquesne University. I worked as an instructional technology assistant in high schools and also in middle school. And I worked on some projects as instructional designer. So for the past, I guess, 8 years, I've been doing instructional technology, instructional design as my kind of side hobby, side job, in addition to my full-time job as a language instructor at the University of Pittsburgh. So I prepared a number of workshops and led various professional development workshops. And also I organized small symposia and colloquia for language educators and also for university instructors on various teaching methodologies and also teaching with technology. I'm also the director of the StarTalk Summer Language School here at Pitt, when we welcome 20 high school students and they study Russian for 4 weeks in an intensive environment. And I will let the second presenter to introduce herself, and this is Dr. Anna Dyer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Dyer. Some of you may know me as Anna Kolesnikova from previous years. First of all, I would like to thank Olga for inviting me to co-lead this workshop with her. We have envisioned it as actually a small, series, and we kind of were hoping to get at least 30 people in. And as you can see, we already have 200 here and we have about 400 registered. So it's somewhat terrifying, but at the same time, it's very exciting. Thank you all for coming. We are planning a lot of information, to teach you a lot of information. So today, Olga will start and will give you a very thorough introduction to online learning, to the theories behind online learning. Then I will lead the next 2 webinars, and the first one in my series will focus on synchronous and asynchronous activities, so using Zoom and using your language management systems. In the third one, we're going to get into it a little bit with our hands-on. It will be applied, where I will be showing you how to create specific assignments and tasks and activities that we have introduced to you in the first 2 workshops. I am a language teacher. I teach Russian at the University of Iowa. At the same time, I do have some experience with technology. I have PhD in second language acquisition with emphasis on technology. I've been teaching a variety of online courses, and I involve technology in my teaching a lot. So I hope that a lot of the advice that I will share will be very useful for you. Today, I will be assisting Olga in conducting this workshop, and I will be responsible for moderating the chat. So once Olga goes into the presenter's mode, it will be hard for her to access the chat. We will have time at the end of this workshop for you to of this webinar for you to ask questions. But if you have a pressing question during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat. You can send it directly to me, or you can send it to everyone, and then I will either respond to it directly, or I will decide whether I will ask Olga to interrupt her presentation to address this question. We might not get to all of the questions that you are submitting, but we will try to follow up on everything later. So once again, welcome and enjoy our series. And I give turn to the next person on the team, Dagny Felker, and she can introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for being here. It's really exciting to see so many people are attending this webinar. So I'm Dagny Felker. I just completed my undergraduate degree at the University of Pittsburgh. I study linguistics and Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies. And I met Olga, Dr. Klimova, when she was my Russian professor. But since then, I've assisted her with a variety of projects, including this one. So my job today is kind of to manage the technology and hopefully make the ASL interpretation visible for everyone. Amber just got in, so that's good. And then we also have Jennifer helping us today. So Jennifer should be spotlighted right now. Hopefully everyone can see her. If you want to change the video that you see, you can individually pin a video by hovering over the little thumbnails. But if anyone is having trouble seeing the interpretation or having any sort of technical issues, send me a message in the chat and we'll figure it out. Otherwise, just to mention, the interpreters will be switching every 20 minutes. So periodically, I will break into the presentation to allow them to switch and change the spotlight. And I think that's all. So yeah, again, if you have any issues, send me a chat.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Dagny. Thank you, Anna. So, and I think we'll start. And I'm here on the first slide. You can see our learning outcomes. So, and we hope by the end of this session, you will be able to identify the main steps and procedures of the instructional designs. We will introduce you to the 3 instructional design models, and you might be able to choose later which one works for you the best when you start designing your curriculum for the fall. We'll also go over the main characteristics and the benefits and the limitations of online teaching, specifically in the context of a language classroom. And hopefully you will also be able to identify and recognize effective examples of learning, language learning activities and assessments using instructional technology, and also recognize the best practices in online teaching in general that can be used in your own language classroom. So, and the first model, which I would like to briefly talk about, is backward design. And I think that many of you are already familiar with it because it is one of the most popular instructional design model used in the college setting. And also I know in schools, they also use backward design. And this is a very helpful model because it's quite simple. It doesn't have too many steps. So it starts with identifying learning goals, learning outcomes, and then you, so that's why it's backward. So you first figure out what is your end result, what you are aiming at. Then you figure out how you're going to assess, how you're going to assess your students in this specific learning environment. And after that, the next step, you will be developing learning activities and also incorporating specific content. So if you look at the model here, this is how it will look when you try to develop the online course. So of course the learning outcomes, and for example in language classroom we can use can-do statements through the ACTFL. If you're coming from different system, not from the US, maybe you're using some other standards, world language standards. So this is something that you're going to use here in the first step. The next step, you will be identifying assessments. And of course, you will have 2 sets of assessments, formative assessment and summative assessment. So something or what you're going to have throughout your entire course to make sure that students are moving toward their learning objectives, toward your final goals, and also something that will give you some feedback on your own teaching and your own instructional design. And finally, the summative assessment. So this is how you will know that students did meet these learning objectives. And the next step, this is the learning activities, and this is what you're going to figure out for yourself, how you're going to do this in your language class. You will be trying to identify what to use, whether to put learning activities in a synchronous mode or asynchronous mode, whether you want these activities to be individual or in pairs or in groups. So this will be also your decision at this step. And you will be also choosing the materials, and that's when you will be looking also at scaffolding and support for learning. So identifying the best resources, the best materials for your students. This may be some vocabulary activities, maybe grammar activities. You might be choosing also your textbook here, or maybe developing your own materials for your language students, and anything that can help your students to progress and move toward the final goals. That's where you're going to use. You will be looking at the structure, right? After you identify all these different steps, you will start building your online course. You will be organizing it, so you will have to keep in mind how you're going to structure different elements and what technology you're going to use, what multimedia you're going to implement in your course in order to help your students to move towards the learning goals. And then finally, you will start teaching, right? You start teaching your online course, hopefully in the fall, and you will be keeping in mind several things like how you're going to establish your presence, your physical presence, your intellectual presence, cognitive presence, how you're going to facilitate the teaching process during the semester. And the final, of course, thing that keep in mind, and I will go back to this question at the end, it's the question of usability and accessibility of your online course. So the second model is more common and more popular in online language, in online course development, in online instructional design, and it is called ED model. So it's analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. So what is important to remember that you're going to look at different things here, different steps here, but they're not progressing. They're actually interchangeable. They all interact with one another. It's not a linear structure. So in the beginning, when you start looking at the first elements, so you will be analyzing, and you will be analyzing the content, your learners, and you want to know who your learners are going to be. You want to anticipate any issues and problems. This will be their needs, their special needs. This might be their abilities. This might be something else. Maybe you will identify that some of them are heritage speakers, or someone needs additional support. So this is the time and the stage at which you analyze all these elements. So at the next stage, you will be thinking about, right? So this will be designed, so it's actually putting together an outline. So again, what are your learning outcomes, what are your learning goals, similar to instructional design model backward design. That's where it comes it comes handy. So you, again, like in backward design, you will be looking into assessment. So first outcomes, then assessment. Then the teaching methodologies or instructional strategies will be the next element you will be identifying at this stage. And you also will be deciding on technology. So what tools you're going to use here, what you're going to use for your assessment, what you're going to use for your learning activities, and that's when you will be kind of finishing this stage of instructional design. Then hopefully after you get enough information from the first two stages, and analyze and design, you can start develop. And that's when you will be either adapting some textbook, getting some materials developed on your own, or maybe you already have something that you have developed in the past. So that will be your stage. And the next stage is actually teaching, right? So this is the implementing all your teaching lessons and units, and you will evaluate at the end. But again, as I wanted to mention, this ED model, according to this ED model, you do not just keep evaluation at the end. It will come back during the development materials. You will be evaluating everything at the design stage. You're kind of looking back and thinking like, okay, is it working or not? Maybe I have to reassess this. Maybe I have to come up with new assessments. something better teaching methodologies and strategies. So as I said, it's not a linear process, but this is something that is very commonly used in instructional design for online teaching, and it's been popular since, it's been working since 1975, I think. So then
Olga, I'm sorry,
yeah.
can I interrupt you for a second? Two
Mhm.
things. Only you can make the second interpreter into a co-host. And the second thing, your markings are still on the screen.
I didn't do any markings.
Oh, somebody must have accidentally. Yeah, but we cannot control that, but you can control it and remove them, like if you can from your, but if you can do add Amber as the interpreter, because neither Dag nor me can. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay, so I will do now Amber as interpreter. Okay,
Yes.
I don't see Amber.
Amber Baller, if you put her in the oh, it's hard for you to, you want to leave the presentation for a second, and this way it will be easy to access participants.
And while we're doing this, I'm going to switch over to Amber.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
Someone did the marking on my screen, and I don't know who was this person.
Yeah, if you kind of hover your mouse over and find annotations and then more, there will be clear all markings.
No.
Once
doesn't come out.
No, within, like, once you share the screen. Or whoever remembers marking the screen using annotations, can you please erase them?
Okay.
Once we go into the presentation mode, it's hard to switch between the controls for Olga. Okay, thank you very much. There you go.
Okay, so we'll go back, right? Okay, so the next one, Dick and Carrie, we still have one more marking if someone can erase it. This will be great. So the third model is Dick and Carrie model. So it's slightly the extension, kind of the refined model, ED model. It is the difference is that it is more commonly used in the educational setting. And you can see, unlike ED, that it has only like 5 stages. It adds a little bit more details into how the instructional design happened using this model. And of course, as all of these 3 models, they start with the instructional goals or outcomes, learning outcomes in the as a first stage, as a first step. And then here also they pay attention to the entry behaviors, right? So this is actually the difference between Dick and Carrie model and then, for example, ED model, is that it takes into account for example, our students' behaviors, what they know and what they don't know. Something that what we are familiar as educators, language educators, with Vygotsky, the zone of when we're talking about Vygotsky. And
pretty well yourself. Should have 2 blankets for dry cleaning here, both wool.
Okay, I think we have someone. Can we unmute or mute people there?
Tritipo, T-R-I-T-I-P-O.
Dagny, can you please mute the person there? Okay.
Yep.
Ever trying to find him?
Yep.
Just mute everyone, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said, we have so many participants, so we anticipate there will be some problems, even though we originally muted everyone at the entrance. But this is something, as you can see, I'm not going into detail into this model, but this is something you can research more, because it looks in more details, it gives you more kind of steps, but it means that it can be a little bit more complicated, but it also can take into consideration more other things that you might overlook in while you're using backward design and design, instructional design model. So when we talk about the first step, as I said, like in all these models, they do talk about outcomes, the instructional goals, learning outcomes. And when we talk about language classes, we of course can refer to something that already developed for us, and we can use actual performance descriptors. And we have put together a small handout which we'll distribute later. We'll share it with you, where I put the links to useful information, including the links to actual performance descriptors. We can also use can-do statements, and it's very helpful. I noticed that if for language instructors, performance descriptors are useful for yourself, and in a second I'll show you what they look if you're not familiar, right? So they're helpful for instructors when you develop your lessons, when you develop your language curriculum. So they offer you interpersonal, and then the ones for interpretive and presentational mode of communication. And they talk about the functions and the text type and the content, and also the communicational strategies. So I noticed with my students, can-do statements work a little bit better, less confusing, they're simple, and you can also design them as a language educator, as a language instructor. You can design your own can-do statements that are relevant to your specific course, to your students, after you learn about them, after you analyze their needs and their characteristics. So they will be kind of personalized can-do statements, and students like to see them. And in our language classroom, in our language curriculum, we use can-do statements for students to work with during their final stage when they prepare their final digital portfolios. So, and this is something that I've noticed was very, very helpful for them to reflect on. So this is just the performance descriptions. As I said, you can follow the link later with the resources. And so the next stage, if we're talking about this instructional design models, right? We established the learning outcomes, the goals, and then next we decide how are we going to assess, how we are going to assess the students actually moving toward these goals, right? So how can we see that there is a change in what they know and what they don't know? And in online language classes, there are various forms that you can use, different types of assessments, formative and summative assessment. Here's just a link, right? Here's just a list of some of them. So in our language classes, we use online quizzes, and you're probably familiar with Quizlet and Socrative. And there are also, there is such a thing like a Poll Everywhere and Kahoot and things, web-based tools like these ones. You can also use in-class polls. Even Zoom allows you to do the polls, right? And if you're using tools like Zoom or something, some other video conferencing tools, you can do polls by using special tools, or you can just use some kind of like a poll by using chat box. Or anything like in Zoom, we have like a raised hand or yes, no. So you can simply integrate this in your online language class, just to make sure that you do checks for understanding and they're regular. Interactive video quizzes, very helpful, and students can do this on their own, and you can also do this together with them. For example, in a Synchronous class, and some tools are EduPuzzle and also H25, which is I'm going to list these tools a little bit later. Students can also complete online exit slips. You can prepare them in advance. You can share, for example, them with, on Google form, or you can even, if you have a learning management system, you can have online exit slips. And let's say after each synchronous meeting, students will have to complete a specific short exit slip. This might be multiple choice, or it can be an open-ended small survey. And this is something that will give you a better idea whether your students have met a specific small goals for this class session. Interactive slideshows allow you also to check students whether they're moving toward the goals. And I'll just show you these. Mostly today we're going to do the screenshots of things, not interactive, but as I said, there will be a document with a link so that you can follow later and just go and look at these examples. So for example, Nearport is one of the tools that allows you to create learning activities with integrated formative assessments. And it can be done asynchronously, so you can assign students to do this at home, or you can do this while you are, for example, doing a video conference in the Zoom or Skype. And of course, online classroom observations, it is a little bit challenging in online class. So in the ideal world, we would ask our students to keep their web cameras on during our synchronous sessions. However, I know there are different issues. Some students might not have access to webcam. Some students might feel that their privacy is being violated. So there are different reasons, but of course, if your students if you can prepare your students for this and say, okay, like, this is a language class and I would like to see how you're saying things, because maybe I can correct your pronunciation. Maybe I can correct your gestures. Maybe I can give you some feedback by just looking at your screen. So in this case, your students might be more willing to share their video camera. As for summative assessment, online written tests, and you can use your learning management system. And in general, my advice would be to use one kind of central place, possibly your learning management system if you have one. It may be Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, etc. It may be Google Classroom, or maybe if you don't have access to this, maybe you can use some other platforms. Maybe you can build like a website where all your stuff will be listed, but just to have everything centralized. And how else you can, what other summative assessments you can use in online language classes? You can use oral interviews from video conference, right? It can be Zoom or GoToMeeting or Skype or even Facebook Messenger. Students can also record their dialogues and monologues, and things like Flipgrid helps, VoiceThread. Also, I have a couple examples on my handout, so you can look at them later. You can also think how you can make integrated performance assessment digitized and can move it online. And again, the resource for, if you're not familiar with integrated performance assessment, there are numerous resources, including Carla has some very detailed information and guidelines on how to create it. And you can think of how you can make it as a summative assessment and include it in your curriculum. Digital projects, actually, because everything becomes digital, everything goes online. This may be something that you have never done before in your language classes, but might be your possibility and opportunity. Because you can use various tools now, and students might want to do something creative and something you can offer them relevant to them, and that's how you can make them more motivated, more enthusiastic, and more involved with the course materials by making something creative and something interesting and relevant to them. And as I said, in our courses, elementary, intermediate Russian, we are using also digital portfolios or e-portfolios, and there are special tools for this, or you can use different other things like Google Google Doc or Google Slides, things like this, so they can share, as long as it is shareable, and they can share with you and maybe their peers and also other stakeholders. So tips, these are just more practical tips for online assessment. Because we are moving to online, so, and it's going to take a lot of time. I know that a lot of educators and language instructors have concerns because it feels like online teaching takes much more time than regular teaching, like in the regular face-to-face classroom. And sometimes it might be a case, especially if you haven't developed things in advance and you are spending your time during your class, like during your academic year or semester, developing all this stuff, it's going to take a lot of time. So if you can try to minimize your time loss, I guess, and your spend less time on some things, cut corners, let's say, but wisely, I would say that try to find the ways how to make assessment self-graded. So maybe these are quizzes which have already, when they complete them, they have already correct answers. Or maybe after they complete something, you send them like a separate handout, or there is a separate link to the resources where they can check and compare to the correct forms. And this is why I think an integrated feedback and immediate feedback is very helpful, because students are alienated. They might not have an opportunity to ask you questions right away when you're in a regular classroom. So if there is a possibility to give them an immediate feedback, and I know that we can do this in synchronous sessions, but in during the asynchronous mode, you might not be able to respond to the questions right away. So something that you can predict, maybe the common mistakes students make, and you can submit like some kind of a handout there, or have it available there. Or maybe you can also use, sometimes like I use Skype as text system, text message system. And if this is something, of course I limit the time, and I tell them don't text me after, let's say, 8 p.m. But if this is something very essential and very important for them, especially when we were teaching online, my students will text me through Skype and say, okay, this is what was on the homework, but I couldn't get it. Like, can you help me? What is it? So this was actually helpful. But again, use your time wisely, because you cannot spend all your time just teaching. And sometimes it feels like that's what you might encounter. And this is another opportunity, because the workload is so difficult, so much, you might consider using peer assessments. And this is the best opportunity when you have different class. I mean, it's maybe unequal. Maybe you have students, strongest students. Maybe you have heritage speakers. Then you can pair students up, and for example, stronger students can help students who are struggling, and maybe they can give some feedback on their assignments. And again, because if you start thinking how much, like if you have to start from scratch, it's going to be very difficult to create an entire online course right now. And so you can go back and look at your materials, and you can just try to figure out what is going to work for me in, let's say, online environment. Maybe you already have a handout, which you usually would just distribute in class, and students will be writing on it. But you might just copy and paste this handout on an interactive online whiteboard. And students will be also doing this, but on this interactive whiteboard. And the best part is that they can now do this with other students together while they're sitting at home, right? Because this interactive online whiteboard allows you to collaborate. And again, if you look at web tools such as Quizlet or Edpuzzle and Kahoot, many of them have archives. They have collections of different resources which are available for public. So you might just Google and they say you're using a specific textbook or a specific level of like French, I don't know, or German, and you can put in there these search words, and you can find already prepared quizzes there, right, or flashcards, and you can just adapt them and make some changes that are useful for you. And that's what I said, like, if there is a possibility for you to cut corners, let's say, but still be awesome, this is your way. Don't try to create the wheel when it's already there. And unlike regular class, I would say that students can get lost. They feel alienated. So in online classes, you might need to offer them more regular formative assessments. So if you have something in the beginning of the class, then in the beginning of the week, then maybe at the end of the week. So something you might have to check on online students more often than on your regular student, just because there is a chance of them getting lost in space because they feel alienated, they might be frustrated, they may be stressed out, and this is something that you want to anticipate. And in online learning, language class, you can ask your students to participate both participate in typed activities and also handwritten activities. So if you want to assess students, let's say with some languages, you need to draw special characters, right? Or with yes.
Hold on for a second. We'll switch the interpreters now.
Mm-hmm. Can you spotlight them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Excellent. Okay, so, and just think that you can assess students' handwriting through online tools as well. I already mentioned interactive online whiteboards, right? They allow you to draw. Maybe not the best, especially if they don't have access to tablets, to special like e-pens. It might be a little challenging, but you still can do this. Also, many learning management systems, when you grade their homework, they allow you to leave comments, handwritten comments. And again, students can just use regular paper and pen and write on it, and then take a picture and submit it through your learning management system or through other modes of submission. And as for test, I know this is a question that many educators have been asking over the past I guess 3 months. So students now sitting at home, they have access to all these materials, they have textbooks in front of them, they might have some help. So how do we avoid cheating? And of course, this is a challenging question, because you cannot, especially if you decide to have online tests synchronous. So there is no way you can check whether they're cheating or not. But if this is something important for you, so you can still organize tests during your class sessions, your synchronous class sessions. And you can say, okay, guys, you need to have your web cameras on. So we have another, let's say 15 minutes, and you just sit in front of your computer and you complete your online tests, but you have them and you're proctoring them. I haven't done this because I think that in my specific case, it wasn't so essential. I let students kind of do their tests as an open book, but the way how I organize questions, design questions, if students don't know, if they don't understand, they won't be able to successfully complete this test. But because there is a higher chance of cheating in an online language class, what I do in my classroom, we just make this test online, asynchronous test, weight a little bit less. So for example, if it was a regular face-to-face class, I would assign, let's say 50 points, but because there is a high risk of them cheating, I would, let's say, put them as 25. And put other activities. I know the video presentations, maybe the essays, maybe the participation in synchronous class, weight more. At the same time, I don't know how is it going to be for us in the fall, but I know that in the spring the rules were different. We were requested by the administration not to punish students for not participating in online classes. And I know from my own experience, if this is no stake assignment, if there are no points given for this specific assignment or task, students won't complete it. So I would make this participation in class attendance participation just like low stake, but still students would know that I want to participate in these synchronous classes because I can get these 5 points. And just try to encourage your students to be there, because learning language happens when we interact, when we negotiate the meaning, and for this you need people to be with you, you need people to be present. So something going back to this instructional design models about the stage of analysis, right? For example, backward design doesn't spend enough time on this, but Eddie and Camp and Carey do pay attention to the characteristics of online learners. I think it is important to remember that most of our students are not ready. They're not ready to be online. They don't want to be online. And because in order to be an online learner, you should possess a specific set of characteristics. And some of them are just, they need to be very organized, and they need to be very proactive, and they need to be self-directed and organized. They have to have wonderful time management skills, and they should be also very focused and willing to take challenges, because they're going to learn new tools. They will be learning in a different mode, right? So they will be exposed to more challenges, and they need to be ready for this. And of course, in this new COVID environment, they will need to also balance their private lives and their personal responsibilities with their work and their studies. And this can be also a challenge. And of course, because we are going online, because we're going to use technology, they need to have some level of proficiency with technology. And very often we make mistakes, especially if we teach younger learners, right? We make a mistake by assuming that they're all skillful, they're all proficient in technology, and that's not the case. Even in my language classes, when I taught, let's say, elementary students, and we had a lot of freshmen, so they're like 18, 19-year-old. They know how Twitter works. They might know how Facebook works, but they don't know how video editing tools work. Some of them don't know how Google Maps work and things like this, because they never had to do this. And we need to keep in mind. So many of your students will start their classes in the fall, and they are not as proficient in technology as you might think they are. And one thing which I noticed from my own experience, that they can be trained. It's an additional task for you, and it's an additional skill for them to learn. But we can just offer some support for this, and I'll just, in my next slide, I'll show you what exactly you can do. So, for example, in our, we have College of General Studies here at the University of Pittsburgh that offer online classes. And they recommend, before you register for online classes, to go and take a quiz. It's like, are you ready for online courses? So I posted these links in this document, which I'll share with you later. But a lot of universities have very similar quizzes or online self-assessments, whether you're an online learner, whether you're going to succeed in online learning or not. And I would say that probably if most of our students try to take this quiz right now, they might fail, or they might say, okay, you are not ready for this. And but something which I think we can do is that offer our students to take these quizzes, right? There are different resources, there are different quizzes. You might be able to find one maybe your school district offers this, maybe your university offers something like this, or you can just find the models online and then create your own on Google Forms and ask your students to take this quiz. And it will be partially for them to, or for you to find out what they know, what they don't know, but also it will show what they might need in order to succeed in this course, right? And if you send this link to them earlier, let's say you can send them in the next like a week or a month, so they have the whole summer to kind of think, okay, I might have to work on this in order to be ready for the fall semester. So this is just to prepare students. And so the support which I'm suggesting, like to support our students who might not be ready for online teaching or for online learning, is that first to take this quiz, then to make sure that you offer them clear expectations, and it's everywhere on your syllabus. It's on the page of your course in your learning management system. If it is in the class, in the beginning of the class, in your synchronous class, make it more explicit, make it clear, because when you're not present, when there is no constant interaction between the instructor and the learner, there are more questions, there are more problems, there are more gaps in information, and then you want to kind of anticipate all these potential questions, all the problems, by making everything clear and explicit. You can also refer students to different university and school resources, and this is something that you can post on your course, on your online course webpage under the tab resources. And of course, be available. If you can be available at least like a few weeks before the semester begins, before your course begins, this is great, because maybe you can just send a quick email to your students and say, hello, I'm your instructor, I'm going to do this, and I'm available to answer some of your questions related to our course. When you organize how we can support our students, those who lack of organizational skills, and those who might not know what to expect, and they are not self-directed. So clear structures and clear course outcomes, and offer them grading rubrics. In online classes, grading rubrics that students can see and they have access to, maybe in advance, that help to eliminate some questions and some problems in the future. And also examples and models. So more than ever in online environments, students will need to do this, because they will be at home on their own, and they might not be able to ask you a question, especially if you're not going to have regular synchronous meetings, or they cannot wait until your next synchronous meeting. Then they want at least to have something in front of them, some kind of reference. As in order to support and help them with these technology issues, my advice would be to limit technology. It might sound strange in an online course, but what I mean by this is less is better. So you choose specific tools. Let's say you choose one large tool to keep your material centralized. It can be a learning management system or Google site, or anything else. And then you choose a couple more tools that you'll use consistently throughout the course. So one will be for your assessment of like vocabulary assessment, Quizlets, for example. One will be for the speaking activities, this will be your Flipgrid, and then the test and something will be online through your learning management system. And that's what I mean, because my students, when I got my students' evaluations recently. No, the recent one actually wasn't not bad, but only when we started originally doing the hybrid program, the first, I think, semester, students said that they were overwhelmed because we tested VoiceThread and Flipgrid, so they felt already like two different platforms which are similar. They were confused, so we started eliminating by making it less, but for the specific purposes. And as I said, be consistent. So if students learn how to use one tool, that's excellent, because they master this tool, they feel comfortable and just use it throughout the semester, use it throughout the year, because they don't have to spend time on these technological issues or trying to become proficient with this tool. Detailed instructions, very helpful, written instructions, but also you can record video instructions. We recorded video tutorials, but if you don't have time to use video tutorials for the specific tools you're going to use in your online classroom, you can just find a lot of video tutorials on YouTube. They're already numerous for Flipgrid and Kahoot and things like this, and you can just send references, links to these video tutorials and post them on your course website. And of course, because they will be dealing with technology throughout the entire semester, we will need to support them. Of course, many universities have separate resources for like technical support, but also what I did in some of my online classes, because I also taught not language classes, but content classes online, I created like a help clinic. And this will be a special discussion board where students will be posting questions, and I will be coming and checking and answering these questions. Other students would go and check these questions and answer. And some of these questions will be technology questions. For example, someone said, hey, I use this browser, but this tool didn't work with this browser. What would you guys recommend? And then students say, oh, I'm using Mozilla and it's working. And it's great because this is a support from the class community, and also the technology issue is solved. And finally, guiding them, right? If we have especially freshman students, they might be coming into the college environment and they are not ready. They are learning the entire new kind of learning model, how to study, how to prepare, how to take tests, and guiding them by offering them detailed instructions, helpful, setting deadlines, and a lot of reminders. So in my online classes or like hybrid courses, we have deadlines in my main syllabus. We have deadlines in weekly syllabi. We have deadlines when we post deliverables or online tasks, and then they have also deadlines in red or in like bright colors or highlighted. And of course, like I would remind them during our meeting and say, don't forget your this and that due on Friday. So in online environment, students have a tendency to forget about the deadlines, and even excellent students from time to time, especially in the very beginning, they would miss deadlines, and you just need to be ready. And that's why I think you should be ready for anything and be flexible. And you can set up the system for like late submission. It might be, you might give a couple of weeks for students to adjust and not get any punishment for late submissions. And then when they establish their routine, maybe after week 3, week 4, when everything is at the same time, on the same date, they will hopefully be able to submit things on time. Then you can say, okay, guys, now we're going to have some like penalty for late submission. And again, it's up to you, because the fall semester is not going to be regular. It still will be stressful. It will be still unusual. It's not just a regular online learning environment. And please remember this. So in addition to regular online learners, right, what our language students might have problems with. So they might have anxieties about our languages, especially if these are languages that have very significant differences between their own language, and they might have some anxieties and fears about learning it or about new alphabet, right? They also always many language students, and even your regular language classes, they might have fear of making mistakes. Many of them come and they don't know how to learn language. Maybe they didn't take any language classes before, and this can be an additional challenge. And some or many of them might not even know how their own native language work. They might not understand what adjective is, what is, I don't know, past tense and past present tense and things like this. And this is something also can be difficult, especially when you want to explain some grammar and they don't have any points of references. And students might not be autonomous learners, right? It's difficult for them. They're always learning language in groups, and now they will be learning on their own. And this can be also an additional challenge for them. And unlike some other content courses, right, that maybe meet only twice a week, language courses usually meet more often. They meet 5 times, 4 times, or even 3 times a week. It means that after each class, they have to do work. It means that after each class or before each class, they have to go online and complete specific set of online tasks. So they can be overwhelmed by all the work that they need to do for our language classes in order to succeed. So my kind of idea is how we can help with anxiety is to have some fun, relevant resources. And because everything will be somewhere in some platforms online in your learning management system, you can post some memes or maybe some videos or some kind of infographics, something just, you know, to release the tension and to make the learning more enjoyable. Maybe something with cognates, and they will be able to recognize it even if they're novice learners. And maybe they will have fun, right, with this. Fears of making mistakes, just offer them task-based assignments, and even if they make mistakes, as long as they complete tasks, so kind of target them at completing the task, successfully complete the task. And if these are students at the novice level, intermediate level, they're still allowed to make mistakes. But as long as the task is completed, let's say they were supposed to negotiate the meaning and buy a grocery store, and they end in this situation where they do buy these groceries, so they are successful. And also to let...
Hold on for a moment, we'll switch. All right, should be good.
So for also connecting them to online communities. I have students who actually started learning Russian because they first found some friends through social media like Viber and WhatsApp with Russians. They started communicating and then they decided to take Russian. So if you can connect them safely, of course, especially if they're maybe college students, I would be a little bit suspicious to offer these for high school students and middle school students. You can connect them to some online communities where they can interact. Or, for example, there are special language learning online communities like Busu. These are the specific communities where people go in order to interact with the native speakers. So maybe you can refer your students to these communities and post a couple links to these communities. And as long as they can talk with native speakers and native speakers can understand them and they can help them to work on their mistakes, they might be less anxious about making these mistakes. With how to learn language, foreign language, right, or how to learn the target language, you can create a video guide. And for example, it can be a video guide just how to learn language in your specific course. So we did create for our elementary Russian courses, we created small video tutorials using screen capturing tools. And this would be something like, you first go here, you look at the syllabus, you look at this, you go to this website, now you complete these assignments, you go to Quizlet, you play with flashcards, you look at the words, you look at the translation, then you play some games, you can do this. And we narrated what the students should do, right? And then you go back and then you take this quiz, for example, right? When you come back, we'll be practicing in class. So kind of you narrate the steps of what and how they should do, right? And you can say, even post something saying like, okay, and don't forget that you need to review the vocabulary on a regular basis, because when you come to our, let's say, synchronous meetings, we want you already to produce something, right? You need to know these words. And if you record these video guides and post them in your learning management system or whenever you host your course, this can be helpful. As for the for them to introduce how, let's say, English works, right? If it's their first language, or maybe their native language, maybe they're international speakers, international students, you can just post links to some resources so that we can at least read a little bit, like a small introduction to their own language, just to see how they can compare their own language to the target language. And for example, I know we have resources for like English for students of Russian language students, something like this. So these resources, there are numerous resources online, and you might be able to add resources. And in online environment, additional resources, this is something that I guess we're not using as much in our regular classes. We do support students, we do offer them some scaffolding, but in online classes, we also add additional resources. If they have questions, if they want to learn more, they will go and do this independently, especially because we are assuming that online learners, they are autonomous learners, or they try to be autonomous learners. And as I said, in order to help them, numerous reminders and also instructions, because even after several weeks, we've noticed that our students still don't understand what's going on. And even if we post the guide, special guides and instructions, they will still like, oh, what was happening? I was like, why? Did you look at this guide? And they no. So you need to remind them about things like this. And as in terms of online work, just to be flexible. And as I said, with the coursework for language classes, especially when it's online and it's all submitted online, students might need some extra time, right? Especially in the first couple of weeks, students might have problems with adjusting to the new way of submitting their work. And you need to be flexible, maybe being a little bit forgiving, especially in the beginning, and accept like late submissions and stuff like this. So when you're setting an online course, right, what are the things that you will keep in mind when you originally design the structure? So this is already, we are going into this camp and carry model somewhere like in the middle when we are developing kind of the structure. So whether you want to organize your course by modules, which is more common in online curriculum development, or units, by how like maybe you want to follow your textbooks. You also want to identify when would your week start, when it would end, because some people like to start with Monday till Sunday, or some instructors prefer from Friday till like Thursday night. So this is up to you, how you want to set up your learning week, right? Because it's more flexible. It's not as strict like a regular face-to-face class. You also will have to figure out how much students are supposed to spend on each assignment or on each task. Because if, let's say, we have one 50-minute class, students are supposed to spend between 2 to 3 hours of independent work for this class. So it means that if this class is online, and maybe it's not synchronous, maybe it's asynchronous, so you add another 2 more hours. So it's 3 hours total per 50-minute academic hour, right? So on average, let's say if you have a 3-credit language class, right, students will be spending about like 15 hours per week, including the meetings. Let's say if these 3 hours will be synchronous meetings, and then they will be doing extra work. So do not only establish the backlog for students, but also let them know. You can even post this on in your syllabus, so students would know what your expectations are for how much time they're supposed to spend on these online tasks. Deadlines are important, as I said, and you can set it up. Like in my experience, I've noticed that 11:59 p.m., so basically before midnight, works the best. And for larger projects, so like let's say they have to do reading comprehension and then some writing, or they have to create a project or record a Flipgrid video. For my classes, Sundays night worked the best actually. But I know some students don't want to spend the whole weekend working on this. They prefer Friday night. But in my own experience, 11:59 on Sunday for most of the things were helpful. But regular homework assignments would be due the next morning, like due the next class. So the deadline is slightly different. We don't put all the assignments on the same day because it can be overwhelming. But if these are small ones, will be due next class time, next class, and then larger projects, larger assessments will be due, let's say, the end of week. So communication, you want to establish communication. Office hours, you can hold your office hours online, but also, as I said, for example, this is my own policy that I'm using Skype for any technology issues, and I'm using this like text message. And I'm saying, okay, if let's say you're taking an online test and you're encountering some problems, maybe you got kicked out of the test, text me, like send me a message to Skype and I'll reset this test for you. But like I'm like, for example, I established that this is specifically for emergency communication. Otherwise, use email. And you want also to make sure that because they're alienated and feel like they're at home, isolated, they might expect that you're going to check your email all the time because you're now online. So no, so you can set up the rules that, for example, I'm going to respond within 24 hours. So like I'm going to respond, if you posted something on Friday, I will respond on like Monday morning, by Monday morning, if you want to have weekends off. But be clear and also post it in your learning management system, post in your syllabus. Gradebook also something that students would want to know how they're doing. So using Gradebook, especially if you have a learning management system, is wonderful because it will eliminate numerous emails. It's like, how did I do on this? How did I do on that? And just checking emails and responding to emails in an online environment can be overwhelming and time consuming. So if you want another kind of way to cut corners, this is your opportunity to cut corners, just to post grades right away, to give them feedback, immediate feedback right away. So then they don't have to contact you because everything is already answered. Help desk, I told you this is help desk and clinic that I'm using in my classes, and you might consider doing this as well. And I'll show you like in the next slide what it looks like. And netiquette, it's basically if we end up teaching the entire semester, like let's say 14, 15 weeks online, it's not just like several weeks like it was at the end of the last semester. Students should understand better how to interact. Especially many of them will start not knowing each other, unlike the situation in the spring, because they originally started as face-to-face students, learners, and then they transition to online. Here they might not know each other, they might feel more isolated, they might feel less connected to one another, and establishing the rules how they're going to interact in this virtual reality, in this online environment, is essential. So
Olga, Olga, can I interrupt you for a second? There is some questions coming in, but one actually just came in to asking you to elaborate on the help desk and the clinic option.
Okay, so this is the help clinic. So as you can see, this is in Blackboard, and the bottom one is in Canvas. So I'm just posting, like I'm asking students, I'm telling them in advance, please post your questions about the format, about the content, the deadlines, any instructions, or maybe the links here. And the only thing is, like, I cannot do this all the time. I cannot go and check it. But let's say I will make a habit that I will check this help clinic, this discussion board in my learning management system, let's say 2 to 3 times a week. But I'm telling my students, okay, you guys also go there. And as you can see, students are willing to do anything for extra points. So extra 5 participation points, I'm saying, so those students who are very active throughout the semester and they go to this discussion board and they answer their peers' questions, they're going at the end, they will get this, like, let's say participation points, like 55, right? Oh, total. And you'll get this extra 5 on top of this. And as you can see here, like they would go and they would answer, especially these simple questions, like someone didn't read the syllabus. So I no longer need to tell them it's on the syllabus, because other students will tell them, oh, it's actually on the syllabus. She said this and this and that. And also, like, if there are deadlines or if it's something not clear, I can clarify, or other students can clarify for them, for one another. So hopefully that's what it means. So it's help clinic, which is a part of our class community. So we are helping each other, right? And this is just the samples of my module organization. So this is in Canvas. As you can see, modules here by chapters and more like they're thematical. So chapter, let's say, the 3 chapters are more like a one thematic unit. So I organized it as a module, but I also post here how many weeks we are going to spend on these modules. So, and those people who are familiar with Canvas, I actually recorded a screenshot of screen capturing video of this course. And I'm going to share it in the folder at the end of after this workshop is over. So if you want to see the video of this course, how I organize our course, and my narration, like my voiceover, you can watch this video. It's about 10 minutes long. But as you can see, because we had this hybrid course, it was already had most of the stuff, like quizzes were online, tests were online, daily tasks like deliverables, Flipgrid videos were online, projects were digital projects submitted online, listening assignments were online, reading assignments were online. So many things that we're doing, it was like independent work, which they would probably do after each face-to-face class anyways, but it was already designed in such a way that we use instructional technology from the very beginning. So this is already how our course looked from January, like 2nd week of January. So, and if here, if you open the module, so as you can see, this is week online class tasks or deliverables, right? So if you press on this, you'll see, please complete this and this by this deadline. Then there are links, there are also submissions and the deadlines when they're due, how much they wait. It's so important for students to know this. Also, daily homework, we have 3 classes, so it's basically end up 3 homework assignments per week. So they worked with the workbook, which was online. It's a part of our textbook, and they were submitting it online. And also, like, if I needed to put some kind of, if I needed to offer them some scaffolding, I would also put in the same folder, right? And PowerPoint slides. And Anna will spend some time in our 3rd workshop telling you how to make your PowerPoint interactive. And actually, she was one of my instructors, I don't remember, like 6 years ago, I think. in the Star Talk program, summer program for language instructors. And so she taught me some tricks on how to make PowerPoint interactive. And the best part is that I use them during regular classes, face-to-face classes. As soon as we moved into this synchronous mode and started using Zoom, I continued using the same PowerPoints. I didn't have to change anything about them. And the best part is that after I was done, I would post this PowerPoints, as you can see, in my folder. And students, and I would tell them, you know, guys, if you want to review, just go and look, open this PowerPoint slides in the presenter mode, and that's when they will become interactive, and you can like try to guess the correct answer, and then you would click and the correct answer will pop out. So this is your another way of reviewing stuff. And I wasn't sure how many students are using this, but I wanted to make this available for them. And then I noticed, like, after week 3 or week 4, students would be emailing. It's like, oh, you still haven't posted the PowerPoint slides. Can you please post? I want to review. So apparently they did use them and they found them helpful. And when we moved to the online format, they were even more like anxious about this. They would email me after the synchronous class and say, hey, can you post this PowerPoint as soon as possible, like right after the meeting, because I want to look at something, like I didn't get it. And that was very helpful. So in Blackboard, I actually organized our materials by units. So we have, let's say, 6 units for one semester. And as you can see, they were organized by units. And when you open the unit, it will have also like by weeks, week 10, week 11, week 12. So temporal markers do help for students to keep it clear what is happening. Again, online class tasks, right? And the deadlines, and also the explanation where and how they would submit it. This is important, and different links as well. So in Netiquette, again, we can only assume that, oh, students should be very nice and they will be sympathetic, but because this human element is missing, or like immediate interaction, face-to-face interaction is missing, sometimes people might not be as empathetic as we can assume, right? And they may, sometimes what you write, let's say in discussion board, might come across as something mean and as, I don't know, maybe assaulting. While if you, let's say you said this in person, it would have felt differently. So you need to warn your students that they need to be very respectful. They need to kind of keep in mind that in online environment, our gestures, our facial expressions might
for a moment. I'm going to switch.
Mm-hmm.
And Olga, while Diagni is switching the interpreters, we have some questions in the chat. Would you like to keep them towards the end of the webinar, or would you like to answer a couple of them?
If they're relevant to the specific material, let's answer them.
Yeah, and also another question, are we taking a quick break, or do we keep going till 5:30? It's 4:55 right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we can, let me finish at 6 if we need like a 5-minute break.
Okay. I think if you guys don't mind, probably since we only have half an hour left, we can keep going, but we can use this time for Olga to answer questions. And if you want to use this as a quick break, feel free to do so. So the first question that we had was, do we have any sources or techniques to help students get rid of the fear of making mistakes in class?
Specifically in online.
In the online environment, I assume, yeah.
In online, we can just model, I guess we can model them, to get them exposed to as many different, I guess, speakers as possible. And I think like with like in my specific experience, what helped is that you do not punish them for the mistakes, at least like obviously, right? You don't take off points as like, no. as long as, especially at the level, elementary level and intermediate level, right? It's like when we still, the most important thing is that they can negotiate the meaning, and then at the intermediate level, they can create with language, they can send the message, they can understand, receive the message, right? The exchange have happened, the communication have happened, so this is a success. So just kind of encourage them by showing, yes, that's like rewarding system. And of course you can, I know that at the level of elementary schools and middle schools, the reward system is important, like Dojo. There are these systems that have like leadership boards or stars and stuff like this. So in online environment, it's easier to establish like an award board, right? You can create like an online interactive whiteboard and say, okay, this week Johnny tried to use as much French as possible, target language as possible in the classroom. Johnny is getting a red star, and you put boom. So this might not work with adult learners, but just interaction, them interacting with native speakers who are not the instructors in my specific station help, because I have several students who ask for the references, ask me how they connect to the peers of their age. I guess that's what helps. And just refer them to different resources, like listen to music and songs, watching videos, maybe with subtitles. But the more they're exposed to the language, the more possibilities of them like modeling their language and fixing if this is like pronunciation mistakes, right, or some incorrect gestures or anything like this.
All right, thank you. And the second question was, how can you calculate or predict the amount of time students will spend on the out-of-class workload?
You cannot predict individually, but I know that each university has this, and you can search it on each university website, because I needed to do the research for myself, that they list actually the policy, how many hours the university expects undergraduate students to spend on their homework. So I did calculate, I used this formula. Let's say one regular class, 50-minute class, it's 2 to 3 homework preparation, right? So let's say altogether, this will be, if this is a 5 meeting class, right? 5 meetings, 50 minutes each. So then you would add 10 more hours, right? So 15 hours altogether, and plus additional hours. And with high aptitude students, actually they spend less than that. And I actually did surveys. I tried to keep to conduct a survey somewhere in the middle or like earlier, especially because we were moving into hybrid mode. We wanted to know more about our students' experience in this like online environment, a special language environment. And one of the questions which I ask is like, could you estimate how much time you spend on average on your online tasks? And I think, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but I was afraid that they're spending too much time. It might be too much work, they're learning new technology. But I think that about half of them did the numbers within like range which I should be, right? Let's say if it's 15 hours, they spend between like 13 and 15 hours. And then a couple students maybe spend a little bit longer, but these are low aptitude students. And I know that they struggle throughout the entire semester with my help, with the help of teaching assistants. And then almost like half of the students would spend half as less as that I would expect. So if it's 15 hours, they would spend actually 7 to 8 hours. Right. And there is nothing I can do about this. I mean, it means maybe they're much better learners in terms of experienced learners. Maybe they already learned to other languages, and they just know how to learn, and they know the better ways, more efficient ways of learning languages, of practicing vocabulary. And so as I said, like, you can use the formula. It's like, let's say 2 to 3 homework hours per one in-class hour or synchronous hour. But it doesn't mean that all your students will spend equal amount of time on the homework.
All right, thank you. So that's the end of the questions for now.
Okay, so, and going back to netiquette and the behaviors, students' behaviors in your online classes, you also remember that the privacy issues become very important. So for example, I told you, like, we are recording Zoom sessions, and students in my evaluations, they actually, several students mentioned this, like, oh, I really appreciate that you recorded our Zoom sessions because I couldn't get online once, or it was difficult for me to focus during these synchronous meetings, but then I went back and I watched the video and it was helpful. We had to research these policies, and that you can record your lessons as long as you are sharing it only within, let's say, your learning management system, and only with the students from this class, right? And only for the purpose of them, like, let's say, reviewing. But it can never, these recorded lessons can never go outside your learning management system, outside this course, or outside even this section. So we didn't even share the videos with other sections, only within the specific section. And if students don't want to use their images, they don't want to use their videos in some specific cases, there is nothing you can do. You can only, like, tell them, explain how important it is for you to give some feedback on what they're doing by watching them, right? Maybe they're doing this during the synchronous meetings. Maybe you ask them to record some videos on Flipgrid, VoiceThread, and you can just tell them, you know, by watching you, I can also maybe give you some feedback on how to pronounce this, or how to do these gestures correctly, right? So think about this, that you cannot make them, right? You cannot make them share their personal information, their videos and pictures, but you can encourage by explaining why they would benefit from this. As for some activities, if it's not essential whether their personal information is there or not, so we have projects, like, I would ask them, create a story, like on Instagram, pictures about their family. But I said, you know what, if you use pictures of Kardashians, you know, the Kardashians, and tell everything, post their pictures, but explain them as if they were your family, and talk about them and write about them using the target language, that's all what I need. Or if you want to use avatar, create an avatar through Voki. It's also like another way to kind of protect their privacy, but still let them create something interactive. And of course, if you are establishing netiquette for your language class, you can also even list there your policy about the language, the target language use, use in your online environment. For example, you can say that if these are questions that are about, like, related to the instructions, clarifications of complex things, please use native language. Let's use L1. However, if this is something that you can ask or can comment on using the target language, please do this. So for example, students can send me an email and they say, do we have a test tomorrow? So in your netiquette, a list of rules for your course, you can say, if you're asking simple questions like this, please use the target language, right? So this is something just to keep in mind. So again, what students want to have from you when you organize your online course, they want to know what their weekly tasks are or deliverables. They want to know the deadlines. They want to know the medium they're going to use to submit, whether it's Flipgrid or Quizlet, whether it's a learning management system quiz, or whether it's, I don't know, something else, maybe it's podcast on the specific website. They want, and that's what they want to know, how to submit. You can say like, this is a PDF file, or this is a whatever JPEG file, blah blah blah, submitted from this and this discussion board 1. They also want to know points, how much it weighs, and also they will need also some kind of support for learning from you and feedback, some kind of scaffolding if this is the case, and especially at the novice level and intermediate level. So best practices, you in online teaching in general, you want to be present at the course site. Of course, it's so difficult to establish this connection to your students. You want to create an online course community, and I'll give you some ideas in a minute some ideas of how to do this. You also want to develop a set of explicit expectations. And this is from Judith Bocher and Marie Conrad, the Online Teaching Survival Guide. Very helpful textbook on like practical tips on online teaching. So just some ideas for activities for online community building. This is one among 2 main reasons why students drop out online classes: alienation and a low sense of community. And you can anticipate it by creating as many pair and group activities as possible. And you can use social media, maybe create a separate Facebook page or Twitter where students can exchange. Maybe Twitter will be your help desk. But help desk in learning management system does allow you to create this additional sense of community and support within the group. And using your language classes to work on projects together. And I know sometimes students are very hesitant to work together and to do group project, but actually in the last 4 weeks of our emergency online teaching, I noticed that students actually didn't mind. It was much easier for them to get into groups for oral tests. They didn't mind working together because I think they finally realized that they're like missing this community. They feel isolated, and they don't mind actually interacting with some group members on some projects. Peer reviews and peer feedback, I mentioned this before, but this is another opportunity for you to connect students to one another. And maybe as a part of your curriculum, you can allocate once in a while, you can allocate 1 hour for small group meetings. So maybe on Thursday, every other Thursday, all your students are meeting the specific time within a small group, and then they have a task that they need to complete. Maybe these are problems they need to solve. Maybe they have to work on a small project. But this will be a specially allocated time within like small groups, maybe 3 people. And breakout rooms, of course, in Zoom, we all kind of familiar. Anna will talk about this a little bit more. But peer comments, if we created, for example, Flipgrids, and our students were using Flipgrids to submit their weekly videos. But almost every Flipgrid, the first task was the following: please watch the video before you by the students who posted prior to you, and respond in couple sentences. So then, after you respond to this, record your own video. So giving them a chance to interact with other students' materials, right, in online environment, it also helps to create this community, online community. So this is just examples from social media. We have a Facebook page separately for elementary Russian and for intermediate Russian. And I've been using, this is my place where I would share these fun, relevant activities. For example, students would be taking a test that week, and I would post some Russian memes about student life and tests. Or maybe there will be some funny video. We are learning about, traveling, and there will be some funny video, and I would post on the Facebook. So fun materials actually kind of separated social media from our Canvas and Blackboard, and the fun stuff would usually go into social media. But also this would be the place where I would again, have another reminder. Don't forget, we have a test coming on Monday. Or please don't forget to split into groups for our oral exam and things like this. And I would say that the best part is, like, for me, when I realized that there is some kind of community, social community building through the social media, community building through social media, students were submitting their essays. So the essays, what I'm meaning by sharing their homework, instead of submitting their essay through the learning management system, right, just to me, I would ask them to post on Facebook, and then students would be commenting. So this is our presentational writing, but then this will be already kind of a interpersonal writing communication, because they would ask and answering each other questions. And then my students, they're done. As you can see, the date is May 8th on the image on the right. We ended like April 25th, I think. And then students still felt that they're part of the community. Then someone went to a Russian store and got some Russian candy, they posted, and we still continued kind of communicating. So this is just like an idea, like how to keep your collective, like the online collective going. And it helps for students. So going back to these best practices, as I said, use a variety of large groups and small groups and pair work. This is, again, to help you build your community, but it also to allow your students to learn from one another, to support one another, to give them different opportunities, different modes. Also alternate synchronous and asynchronous activities, and use the time to reflect, like within like, first, as I said, the week 3, 4, this is nice to give a small like survey just to see how is everything going, and you still have plenty of time to change and address the problems. So group work online, for example, we use online whiteboards, which you can prepare in advance, and you can use anything like storytelling and chat stations there. You can post graphic organizers there where students will be completing their online. You can create puzzles, so it can be anything. And this is just an example on Miro, when students, they had 2 groups, in 2 groups they worked, and I prepared this board for them, and they had to kind of drag the vocabulary for personality traits, personal traits, toward like each character, and they watched the video before, like it's a Russian movie, an excerpt from a Russian comedy, and then they had to discuss this task. But this is for the group activities. On Padlet, we created, like they had to put together menu. So this is just like some scaffolding, some vocabulary list, but they were creating what they're going to prepare for dinner, for dessert, for like what they're going to drink at the party. So working together. Also, for example, you can use Windelberg book and ask them to complete it here. So for example, Padlet, what I like about Padlet, it allows you to record audio. So this is a sample of audio. It allows you to record video. So this is just an example that, let's say, there is a task, there is a video here, or there is maybe a text here, and then students will be just posting their videos here. Or they can type, or
Hold on for a moment. I'm going to switch the interpreters.
So, and if you need students to practice special characters, so as you can see, you can do even handwriting here. So I'm using handwriting here. You can use like special characters for them to write. This is example of interactive individual work on Nearpod. So it can be, and this is actually what I created for the StarTalk several years ago when I was in the Summer Institute for StarTalk language instructors. And the Nearpod allows you to assign this individual work. The students can interact with the content, but you can integrate formative assessments right away. And then you see this is here, they need to make some markings on the slide and then to leave a comment in the target language, or there is even like memory test just to review the vocabulary. So when we go to activities online, and Anna will be talking more about synchronous, asynchronous next week. From my personal experience, what I noticed that when you have to kind of decide between synchronous and synchronous, you will move as much of speaking or signing, for example, if it's an ASL class, signing for the synchronous meetings. Then anything can be done like independently, like vocabulary signing or grammar or reading receptive skills, any activities targeting reading receptive skills, listening or writing productive skills, it all can be done asynchronously. And of course, listening skills or receptive skills, they might need to be integrated both in synchronous and asynchronous mode. But if you have to choose how to use your time wisely during your synchronous meetings, so probably this will be something that you will be spending as much time as possible. But at the same time, you can still, as I said, ask students to create like Flipgrids, voice thread, where they will be speaking or signing, recording their videos and posting in response to your prompts. So interpersonal, when we go to the 3 modes of communication, I would say interpersonal, you can use both in synchronous and asynchronous mode. Interpretive, you will end up having it in your synchronous classes as well, and asynchronous classes. So because this is something that you will have to, communicate, interact with the content in order to later to create your own, to negotiate in the meaning and communicate. Presentational, you can easily do in both, but you won't probably leave it for asynchronous meetings or for students to record, because you want to use your synchronous class meeting as much as possible just for interaction, communication among the students, and also between you and your students. For writing or productive skills, asynchronous would work the best, while, as I said, speaking and signing will be during your synchronous meetings. And listening and reading, which is like also receptive skills. If you're targeting these specific skills, you probably, like I would leave the asynchronous time for this. Because, and from my students' feedback, I noticed that students manage their reading skills in the online environment first. So they usually are not worried about their reading skills, and they want to spend more time on listening or speaking skills, for example. So, and this is just some feedback students gave, and what I learned from this feedback is that students wanted, we will have students with some learning disabilities and difficulties, and we need to keep in mind these things. And students, as I said, like, because they all have to submit this online, and it takes a little bit extra time to go and post here and create or take a picture or create something. So they are nervous that sometimes they're rushing through this, and they're just trying to meet the deadlines and submit it. And they do like when it follows the same format and comes from the same place. This is something I already mentioned. With some of my students, they miss the moment that they couldn't practice cursive as much, right? Handwriting. So we had to, in the second half of the semester, we had to figure out about how to offer them more opportunities to do cursive and handwriting. And they sometimes are very confused when there is too many different tools. So if you, as I said, this comes through to the limiting their instructional technology, but they did like the interactive component, and they like the tests and quizzes were online outside the class, so they could just spend time applying what they learned and interacting and communicating. And this is the comment that they would prefer more listening than reading when they are on their own, but they really like that this was what's moved to the synchronous, because then they can spend as much time on this as possible, just listening and listening again, and then answering the questions. So the best other practices, so focus on content resources and applications, right? Combine core concept learning with customized and personalized learning, which can be slightly difficult because it requires extra time, extra planning, and to create some good final activity for the course. So the resources which I'm posting, and I told you a little bit about how I organize the course. So some fun kind of resources, additional resources. This can be links to movies and podcasts and children books and songs. Some of my students ask about specific apps for like iPhones on like learning and practicing Russian, or practicing Russian alphabet or something like this. So this is something you can find and post in for your students in your learning management system or in your course website. And when you use authentic web-based materials, there are so many resources you might not even think that you can use, right? For special like interpreting, listening, interpretive reading, receptive skills, but they're all there. And you can all integrate them, like online stores and hospital and clinic websites from the countries of the language that you teach. And you might integrate also website forecast websites or travel agency websites when you're discussing traveling, or I don't know, getting ready for trips, or the city even, because they might have this information. Using authentic restaurant websites and menus, or even use their reservation forms and to do a mock reservation and then do a screenshot. This is something that they might enjoy because it's relevant, it's kind of semi-authentic. And there are a lot of also materials online, virtual like tours and virtual art galleries, and now they're even more available in the COVID in context. So these all authentic materials can be used for your language learning, for offering students learning language activities. And this is just some of the things, as I said, you can think of what you can have your students do to practice specific set of skills, whether it's interpersonal speaking or signing, video interviews or recorded video interviews, or this can be live conversations, or even Q&A for presentations. Social media exchanges, like what I show you on Facebook, when they just can't say and responded it's to each other. This is also allows for semi-authentic experience, or creating text messages. And there are apps online, web-based tools where you can even like create a mock text messages and chats. And this can be chats, video chats, and this can be text chats, or even created reviews and then responding to these reviews as if you're, like, for example, an angry customer. And for presentational skills, speaking and signing, I already mentioned several things like Flipgrid and VoiceRate, and they can create presentations through video conference, and like Zoom creates special video, or record their own and edit their own presentation. And for writing skills, it can be wikis and projects and blogs and social media posts. And I'll talk a little bit more in our last workshop about projects, and also project-based language learning, and about community-based activities. So this is just something that, like, when we move from face-to-face to online, for myself, what I realized that you can put in the synchronous mode for individual learning things that are of lower order thinking, because they might require less support. They might require maybe not you being present there to help. While for synchronous meetings, when you are present, when you can support students, you probably want to focus on high order thinking. However, I would probably even keep it as more like as a sandwich, maybe a kind of a metaphor. So low order skills, you might start with them, then you practice high order skills so first it's asynchronous, then it's synchronous, then you go into asynchronous again, but then they are practicing this high order thinking skills, but on their own, after we did step 1 and step 2. So at the step 3, They can create with language, they can create their projects, but they can record their videos or dialogues. And that's when they don't also need you anymore. As if we are using the graded release responsibility model in online class, I would probably, as I said, it can again customize depending on your students' needs and the technology accessibility, their proficiency level, also how many hours you have, whether you have 5 hours per week or you have 3 hours per week or maybe even 2 hours per week. So for iDo, you can present the materials all asynchronously in advance. Students can access it from their computers. Then you come to your synchronous class, you practice together. This is there when you can support them, you can help them, you can offer them corrective feedback. Then depending whether you can afford this time-wise, students can either practice and you do together, so they can do together in small groups or pairs, either during your synchronous meetings, or you can send them to do this on their own and meet with one another in a small group setting through Skype, for example, or Facebook Live and something like this. And then finally, you do alone. They don't need even to be present synchronous mode. You can move it entirely into a synchronous mode.
Olga, we have a couple of minutes of the webinar left.
Okay, so this is just more for information for you, like tools. I'm not even going over them because this is more like you need to look at them, just some ideas for interaction in online language classes, depending whether it's learner and content, learner or learner interaction. And this is just the names of some of the tools, and you can, the presentation, when the presentation becomes available, you can look at these tools and search more. And scaffolding, again, you can post them and send this to students in advance, and this can be different kinds of support. Graphic organizers, you can post in advance anchor charts for your students to use. I've been using a lot of infographics, and they're all available online, even to introduce vocabulary. And examples and models, I would create a small sample of my own project or some my activity, and I post it with my online tasks. Or if here a voice thread, I will record my video, and then students will be already have an example of my video to kind of model their own videos. And with prompts and guides and guidance questions, like also like in online, give them as much guidance as possible. So the usability, these are the final questions. So just when you design your online course, make sure that you keep in mind that the font should be large, make as contrasted colors. I had student like last semester with like colorblind, he couldn't see. So I had to use different colors like white and black, contrasting colors. If possible, use captioning, automatic captioning or transcripts. And simple organization, especially for those students who need to use their screen readers like JAWS, the simple organizations and label pictures with alt text and consistent titles and headings is very important. And don't forget that your students might be accessing this through their mobile devices. So this is just a list of things that you can end the course. Again, you'll have tests, but you want to do something like meaningful for them at the end. And this is just some of the ideas which we are going to discuss in our final webinar, in the fourth one, like community-based project, group projects and individual projects. And I will also mention a little bit about the portfolios. And we are also prepared a list of resources for you. We'll make it available. The links, they're always like clicking links, we'll share with you. So there are various resources for preparing to teach online and preparing to teach language online through Carla, Actful. There is this technology integration in language teaching and learning magazine. So we'll share these materials with you so you can kind of educate yourself more. So this is just like a tiny iceberg, the top of the iceberg, and you can, if you have time in the next month or so, you can go and look at all these resources. So thank you so much. So I know that we kind of like, yeah, we I was hoping to have plenty of time for questions. Maybe if those people who can stay behind, let's answer at least a few questions. Otherwise, we'll just look at your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to compile kind of a Q&A
Actually, Olga, you answered all of the questions. I don't think I missed any. And the chat is full of appreciative messages to you for this fantastic webinar.
Okay, thank you. But we'll look at the chat box anyways, because I did this in the past, knowing that there are some things that maybe I missed, and I can answer these responses. And one thing, that if you register for all the 4 workshops, it's just one registration form. We have your email address in our records, so we will be sharing some materials probably tonight for the workshop today. But then there will be some other materials available after the second one, after the third one, and after the fourth one. Some links, some resources. There is also a list of my examples that's actually live, not just screenshots. So you can just click and look at what we did in our language classes to give you some ideas how you can use this and integrate this in your language classes. And thank you so much for coming. So I know this was all a lot of information, all rushed through, but hopefully you found it useful.
I just want to address one question that came in while you were speaking. So we will have all the materials available to you guys, and we'll share a Google Drive link via email. We'll use the email that you registered with. So don't worry, you will have access to all the links and all of the slides and the recording of this webinar.
Okay, excellent. And I wanted to thank also Amber and Jen for their wonderful job today.
Absolutely.
I know that was a lot in 2 hours, and with a lot of audience. And we, as I said, we are going to have this recording available with the recorded interpretation. So if you know of some ASL instructors who might find this very beneficial, please let us know, and we'll share these recordings with them so they can watch these recordings on their own when they have time.
All right, Olga, I don't know if you can see the chat, but it's thank you.
Yeah.
Multiply by all of the participants that were here. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Anna, thank you, Dagny, for facilitating everything. And we'll be ready for our next workshop on Friday. So Anna will
next workshop is on Friday. So we'll look, as I said, at the synchronous, asynchronous materials, and there were several questions about interactive PowerPoints and the design of the PowerPoints, and that will be addressed on the webinar that's going to happen a week from now, next Tuesday. So in the next 2 webinars, we'll get a little bit more hands-on with some of the things. Yeah, I'm just answering the question that just appeared in the chat.
Okay. You had any support? I love to hear whether you had any support creating some of your materials. I mean, I can quickly, while people are signing out, I can just mention that when we created this hybrid curriculum, hybridized Russian language curriculum, we did get a support from the university. So I applied for a grant, but this was mainly to have undergraduate students hired to help us with. So Dagny was one of these undergraduate assistants who was working on developing the materials or video tutorials.
Hold on for a second. We'll switch the interpreter.
Okay. Yeah. So, but yes, so we did have some of the support. However, what helped is that my language classes were already a flipped learning mode, followed the flipped learning model. So a lot of things that I were using in my regular face-to-face classes, they could be easily moved into the technology-based language class. So in a way, I've been preparing, I guess, for this transition to a hybrid class or to an online class for quite a while. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you, Amber. Thank you, Dan.
We'll see each other on Friday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So bye.
Bye.